A mom thought she was teaching her kid a valuable lesson by judging a dirty worker. She was dead wrong, and his response, caught on camera by a bystander, will make you rethink everything. The rebar bit deep into Andy's gloves, the metal cold even through the thick leather. He grunted, heaving another length into place, the sweat stinging his eyes, blurring the already fading afternoon light. This beam had to be perfect. It was the key support for the second-story floor of what would soon be the Miller family's home. He could almost picture them, a young couple, maybe with a kid or two, making memories within these walls. A pang of longing hit him. He thought of his own two kids, Sarah and little Tom, probably already bouncing off the walls waiting for him to get home. Dinner, bath time, bedtime stories. The routine was a comforting anchor in his often chaotic life. He smiled, a genuine, tired smile. This was worth it. This brutal, back-breaking work, the grime under his fingernails, the ache in his shoulders. It was all worth it. He was building something real, something that mattered. The automatic doors of Fresh Foods Market whooshed open with a sigh, releasing a blast of frigid, artificially scented air and the cacophony of a typical Friday evening grocery run. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a stark contrast to the warm, fading sunlight he'd left behind. Andy brushed at the dried mud caked on the knees of his jeans, a futile gesture. He knew he looked a mess. A quick glance at his reflection in the glass doors confirmed it. Dust-streaked face, sweat-soaked t-shirt clinging to his chest, work boots heavy with dirt. He briefly considered going home to change, but the thought of delaying dinner and those precious few hours with his kids was enough to dismiss the idea. He'd grab what he needed and get out. He was used to the stares, the occasional whispers. People made assumptions. It was human nature. He just usually didn't have the energy to care. He grabbed a cart, the wheels squeaking in protest, and headed towards the produce section. He needed lettuce, tomatoes, maybe some avocados for a quick guacamole. As he rounded a corner, he saw her. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, with bright pink ribbons woven into her meticulously braided hair, stood transfixed, staring up at him with wide, unblinking blue eyes. She clutched a plush unicorn, its once pristine white fur now a little dingy, a testament to countless cuddles. Andy offered her a small, kind smile. He had a soft spot for kids. Their innocent curiosity rarely bothered him. It was the jaded judgments of adults that stung. He'd seen enough of that in his life. Then came the voice. Sharp, brittle, like thin ice cracking under pressure. The little girl's mother, a woman in her late 30s, perhaps, with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a designer handbag slung over her shoulder, leaned down. Her voice was a low, calculated hiss, the kind designed to be overheard, a stage whisper meant for an audience of one. See, honey, that's why you need to stay in school. The words hung in the air, sharp and cold, a deliberate poison dart. Andy felt his jaw clench, a muscle twitching involuntarily. It wasn't the dirt, the grime, the obvious signs of manual labor that she was objecting to. It was what she assumed they represented, a lack of education, a lack of ambition, a lack of worth. A slow burn of anger, mixed with a profound disappointment, began to build in his chest. This wasn't just about him. It was about the insidious message she was instilling in her daughter, the prejudice she was so casually perpetuating. He took a deep, steadying breath. He wouldn't let this go. The checkout line snaked slowly forward, each beep of the scanner a jarring punctuation mark in the thick, uncomfortable silence. Andy kept his gaze forward, deliberately avoiding eye contact with the woman, who was now 2 places ahead of him, fussing with her coupons and her phone. He was formulating his response, carefully choosing his words. He wouldn't yell, wouldn't stoop to her level. He would educate. He would dismantle her assumptions, piece by piece, with the same precision and care he used to build a house. Finally, it was his turn. He unloaded his meager groceries onto the conveyor belt. The cashier, a bored-looking teenager, barely making eye contact. He paid, and as he gathered his bags, he turned to the woman, who was just stepping out of the exit doors, her daughter in tow. "Actually, ma'am," he began, his voice even, devoid of any trace of the anger simmering beneath the surface, I couldn't help but overhear your comment to your daughter." He paused, ensuring he had her attention. Her face was already starting to flush, a mixture of embarrassment and defensiveness. "You see, I'm not just some dirty man, as you might assume. I do have an education. In fact, I have a degree in civil engineering from Washington State University. A rather demanding program, I might add." He let that sink in for a moment. "And those medical certifications you might have noticed, the ones peeking out from under my shirt sleeve, they include advanced trauma life support and wilderness first responder. Each of those required a year of intensive, specialized training, far beyond what most people realize." He shifted slightly, deliberately revealing a portion of the intricately detailed tattoo on his forearm. "And this," he said, his voice taking on a subtle edge of pride, "isn't just some random, meaningless design. It's an American eagle, clutching the stars and stripes, intertwined with a caduceus. It represents my 5 years of service in the United States Army Special Forces, where I served as a combat medic. It's a permanent reminder of the sacrifices I made, the dangers I faced, and the brothers I serve alongside, some of whom didn't make it home." He then gestured to the well-worn baseball cap perched on his head, the one featuring a majestic elk silhouette. "And the elk on my hat? That's the logo for Ridgeback Outfitters. We're a small, locally owned company, focused on promoting sustainable hunting practices and wildlife conservation. We believe in responsible land management, ethical harvesting, and respecting the natural world. We teach young people about the importance of preserving our wilderness for future generations." He paused again, letting his words resonate. "And yes," he continued, his voice softening slightly, "I do work in construction. After my time in the military, I tried the corporate route, the desk jobs, the endless meetings. But sitting behind a computer screen, pushing papers, it just wasn't me. I need to build, to create something tangible, something that will stand long after I'm gone, to contribute in a way that feels real. I'm proud to be a part of building America, brick by brick, beam by beam." He met her gaze directly, his eyes unwavering. "And I do it all for my family, for my wife, who works just as hard as I do, for my 2 children, Sarah and Tom, who are waiting for me at home right now, to provide for them, to teach them the value of honest, hard work, and to help build a future that they can be proud of." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper, but filled with a quiet intensity. "So, before you teach your daughter to judge someone based solely on their appearance, their clothes, or the dirt on their hands, I hope you'll remember this conversation. Because the world needs more people who build, who create, who contribute, and far fewer people who judge, who assume, who belittle. The world needs more empathy, more understanding, and a whole lot less prejudice. Think about the lesson you're teaching her." The woman's face was now a fiery crimson. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again, words apparently failing her. She fumbled with the strap of her designer handbag, her gaze darting nervously around, avoiding Andy's steady, unwavering stare. She looked small, defeated. The little girl, her unicorn still clutched tightly in her hand, stared up at Andy with a newfound curiosity, her bright blue eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and something else. Something that looked a lot like dawning understanding. The carefully constructed facade of prejudice her mother had presented was crumbling before her very eyes. Andy nodded curtly, a single decisive movement. He picked up his grocery bags and, without a backward glance, walked out of the store and into the cool evening air. He didn't need an apology. He didn't need validation. He'd said what needed to be said. He could only hope that, somewhere, somehow, he'd planted a seed of doubt in the mother's mind, a seed of understanding in the daughter's heart. He climbed into his truck, the familiar rumble of the engine a comforting sound. As he drove away, he thought not of the woman's insult, but of the little girl's face. He thought of his own children and the world they would inherit. It's a simple lesson, really, a fundamental truth that we often lose sight of in the rush and the noise of modern life. Every person has a story, and that story is rarely, if ever, written on their clothes, their skin, or the dirt under their fingernails. It's a story etched in their experiences, their struggles, their triumphs, their loves, and their losses. And it deserves to be heard, or at least acknowledged, before any judgment is passed.